It depends.
Klaus has been chair. I would happily nominate him, but that doesn't give him the opportunity to accept the decline, right? And that is my only sort of question and concern is doing that in his absence. Keep that one. It would not be proper process as he would have to accept the nomination. Right. Okay. So we're limited to this group of people.
Or you move it forward if nobody wants to nominate anybody. And Claus had indicated that he would accept that nomination, and I had talked with him last week.
Ultimately, council does ratify that. I would make a suggestion just to everybody here. Although you can't do that because we have any duties forward to Congress in January.
There wouldn't be, but also it has to be go through council, so not sure that it even has to. Go ahead.
If he told you that he'd accept it, there's no problem in nominating him.
I don't see that as a problem. He's actually verbally confirmed that. Administration. Administration comfortable with that process? Excellent. For a committee is, well then, I'll happily nominate Tom. Okay. Okay, call the question, all in favor? All right, on to vice chair. I did. And there wasn't any other volunteers? Eric, Collins, Mexico, I guess. Okay. Nominations for vice chair. I'll name John. Okay. John, do you accept? Yes. Yes. Okay. Any other nominations?
You the seconder?
Okay. Call the question, all in favor? All right.
Can you guys make sure you turn your mics on when you're speaking?
Oh, we're live?
Yep. Sorry. Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, or Chairman for the meeting. Congratulations, John.
Administration, Cole, should we be doing our acknowledgement?
I'm gonna ask Candace, because we had a resolution on when we would
I thought
read that. And
resolution was at any and all county business.
We just checked it for the Oregon meeting, do you recall? Yeah, I think it was just Oregon Council meeting, but we'll just verify, John.
Okay.
There's no harm in doing it if you want to.
All right. Well,
this time.
in the interest of just, procedure, just in case, I just do our land acknowledgement, which is in the true spirit of reconciliation. We acknowledge all those that call this land home now and for thousands of years in the past. May we respect each other and find understanding together and recognize the benefits that this land provides to all of us. All right, and we are now on to new business D2, 2024 Agricultural Service Board Convention, January 22nd to 24th. I'm assuming that you have much to tell us about that.
We have a little bit of information to tell you. So the south region of the AAAF, which I'm a part of and Assistant Fieldman Vance is a part of, are on some committees that we'll be hosting through the south region. And that's going to be at the Agri-Food Hub on January 22nd to 25th. I've seen an agenda. It looks like it's going to be good. On the first evening is the 22nd. That's when folks arrive. It's a Monday, and there's a registration. You go, and some greetings that come from council or the county and other dignitaries. So the county has agreed through council to sponsor that opening evening event for $25,000. And we're just going through the process of how we're going to promote Lethbridge County for, get some bang for our buck. So we're in the idea stage. We're gonna make it fun. Tori will likely speak, Reeve Campbell, and give a welcome on behalf of the county and maybe promote the county and all that we have going there. We also have been in talks to use some local food, so I'm on the committee for the facilities, and some of the food will be some stuff that Lethbridge County has going, cheese and things like that, wine maybe. We're working on that. Also, it's a great facility, so certainly council will be invited to come, and the Ag Service Board, and that's going to be run through the budget process this year. So mark it on your calendars. That's through the budget process. That will very likely be approved. For those of you who haven't gone to one before, it's a pretty good deal. I mean, some of you here have gone, and we go through the resolution process is the main reason we have a conference, but it has not been in Lethbridge for well over 25 years. So this is an exciting opportunity to showcase the new facility that Lethbridge County has given a significant contribution to. So does anybody have any questions regarding that upcoming event?
At our workshop, you had discussed the need for a decent sponsorship. That level was good enough kind of thing?
I think Jeremy worked a little bit on that, and I think that sponsorship level will cover the entire first evening, we're thinking, and it helps immensely because there's other sponsorship opportunities as well. If you know anybody that wants to sponsor, I know some organizations have. That help.
Your plea, we did.
What's that?
Based on your plea, we did.
We did, no, thank you. And as part of that first evening, what we're going to do as well is we're going to have some of the local organizations in the county, such as the LNID, the SMRID, to have a booth, local food, and other local organizations at no cost. It's part of the $25,000. So the food folks that provide some of the food to the facility will be there promoting their stuff as well. So the first night, it is a AAA event, provincial conference, but Lethbridge County is going to be a very big part of it. So if you do know anybody that wants to sponsor, let us know. I can get you that information. We're a little bit behind, so the $25,000, they were very happy that Lethbridge County stepped up. It takes the pressure off of getting some late sponsorship. So, and nowadays, the costs of everything have gone up. So,
Yes, just to add to that as well, I believe we're probably one of the most significant sponsors for this conference, which is significant because, I mean, we are the hosting municipality, and this is in the heart of agriculture here in southern Alberta. Just another note, just for clarity for all ASB committee members, we budget accordingly so that each of you would have the potential to be registered at the ASB conference. So the one thing we will require is Candace will send out some information. We just want to make sure that those that can attend, we will be paying for that registration fee. If there are other things you require as part of that as well, we did talk about the per diems and stuff like that, mirroring some of council's same amounts, and as well as if you require any kind of hotels or anything like that. I'm not sure how far you're coming from. We're all fairly local, but fairly local sometimes can mean the far corners of the municipality. So if you require any accommodations or anything like that, please let Candace know, and we'll coordinate that accordingly.
yeah, and we'll work through all those details as we go forward. One thing, this is, from the county's perspective, this is a great opportunity to showcase that building. There will be folks coming from all corners of Alberta, and they're part of all types of organizations that can possibly use that building in the future. So it'll be out there that all over the province will know about that building. We're the first major conference that's going to be in there. So.
Thank you. Any more questions in that? subject? Comments? Perfect. I, for one, look forward to it. I think it's going to be an awesome event, and as you said, I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to showcase the region and the new Agri-Food Hub Trade Center. Is administration looking for a motion to accept that as information, or just? Okay, we're good. All right. On to E1, Supervisor Agricultural Services Report.
All right, we've done the report up a little bit differently. So what you're going to see here is the exact grant application that we sent into the province. The format didn't work very well in your packages, so I brought up a form that will work here. And yep, I get her. Better. I think you've seen all this. So this was part of they call it a business plan that we send in. The format isn't the greatest, but it's what they give us to work with. So we'll go through that, and you've all seen the vision, mission, values. We won't cover that. We'll get right into the meat of it. So there's goal areas, and each area that ASBs are responsible for, they have, you set out some goals and actions and performance measures there. So what I'm going to concentrate on is the performance measures. So goal area 1 is support of the Agriculture Pest Act. So that's one of our functions. So every year we have 2 pest inspectors that are continuously appointed, myself and the assistant fieldman. And we do surveys, so crop surveys here, clubroot, fusarium, head blight, blackleg, armyworm, and ring rot. So just on those, not a big concern right now for any with the drier year. Fusarium is certainly backed off. There is a little bit of blackleg in the county, but not at high amounts. So we survey each township in the county for grasshoppers, and as you know, dry years, grasshopper numbers build, especially in some areas in the dryland areas. But there's also conditions that can knock those back depending on how wet it is in the spring and things like that. So there could be numbers building here over the next few years. We have some live traps, so we make those available. They want a number in here, so it says 15 is the number we put in as a projection. That number is much larger than that. Folks are using skunk and magpie traps. We do back off loaning them out when there's the avian flu was present, because that could be passed through skunks as well, so we didn't want to be spreading that around the county. One thing that we didn't do, I put an X on this one, was we hire a private trapper to collect skunks for 10 days, and that's for rabies detection. We did that with 5 other counties in the south, and we thought it was important, especially being along the U.S. border. It might be where some rabies would be prevalent. The research station has ceased taking the samples, so they no longer, we'd hire a trapper, he would take the heads and give them to the ADRI. But they have stopped doing that, so the program has ended. I know Warner County was a big push on that, and they're looking into starting it up again. But rabies will come up, and then we'll be doing it again, I'm sure. So, and in each of these goal categories, you're going to see.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just ask a quick question? Was this their final report after a certain number of year term, or what was the timeline on the report? So
This here report is a 5-year grant cycle.
Yeah.
So things change and evolve in that 5 years, but this is what we put in I believe it was 20, the end of this cycle will be next year.
Okay.
So we'll be looking at renewing and going through this again.
Sounds
So,
good, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So in each of these goals, we review the policies, and then we update any pest information on our newsletter and whatnot, so social media. Goal area number 2 is the delivery and support of the Soil Conservation Act, and this has become more prevalent in recent years. We have a couple soil conservation officers appointed. When land starts to blow, we go start and do inspections. They want a number in there, so we put in 5. Some years when it's good, there's there's no soil erosion inspections, but in recent years, it's got, things have really ramped up and become a bigger part of our job, certainly. So we review those policies once a year through our level of service will be happening in information if they've got issues or helping them out with some of our equipment at a charge. Usually in recent years, it's been graders. Some of the equipment there we no longer have. We had a bale processor to crimp in straw if things were getting bad. It was never used, so we sold that while it still had some value to it. So. And just some note on soil conservation. I did a presentation at our annual in-service training with a couple of my colleagues from the MD of Taber and the County Newell. The rest of the province doesn't deal with soil erosion. They don't have the same conditions. They think they might have to, but they're just likely not going to have to. We're on the schedule to speak again at the ASB conference, and they're trying to focus on what ASB do, what we do at this conference. So they got us on the docket to talk. We're going to show some pictures. Trevor Wallace from Alberta Agriculture will be there to do a presentation on the history of the Soil Conservation Act, and we'll show what actually happens on the ground. So. Sure.
Just in regards to that, you were saying that Lethbridge County seems to be the only ones to do it. Is that something that's prevalent in Taber and Warner as well, a little bit, or?
Yeah, so it is prevalent in southern Alberta, and the fields that are an issue nowadays are not dryland fields so much. It's the irrigated fields with specialty crops. So that's why Taber, ourselves, and Newell, we've been dealing with a little more. Certainly happens in all of the south, but with less irrigation, less prevalence, I guess, in the dryland areas now with direct seeding. So. Yeah, it was. I think people were astonished at the level of in some areas where the silt had blown over roads and the amount of culverts that had to be cleaned out in some areas. We get on soil erosion very quickly, and we're making phone calls. And when we do have an issue with silting over a road or a culvert, we ask that the producers at their expense have it cleaned through a private contractor. We don't let farmers dig it out themselves, because then there's a possibility of changing the drainage, right? And when we reach out to folks, it's been very good. They understand their responsibilities. These are good farmers. This is just the conditions over the last couple of years have been, very, very different. So, moving on to delivery and support of the Weed Control Act. Of course, weed control is one of our main areas of focus. We have a weed inspector. I'm also, as being an ag fieldman, as a weed inspector, so we're constantly making calls and dealing with folks about weed issues. Also part of weed control is the municipal inspections of seedling plants. So we do 4 plants, and that's looking for weed content. That's the main thing that we're looking for. And our facilities in the county are very, very good at the quality of seed that they produce. Also, our goal is to spray 33% of municipal right-of-way for weeds. We easily meet that every year. It seems if we didn't have kochia, we might not have to spray as many weeds, but kochia has been a really concern for both farms and for the county. Most of that kochia grows on top of our road, the road's edge, on less traveled roads. So we've got some chemical that works there. It's a chemical that creates a barrier and stops the seeds from coming through. Where it's getting a little more tricky for both farms and for us is contact herbicides later in the year. They're not working. You'll spray a road and you'll come back and you might get 50%. I did an inspection on a right-of-way for a rail line, and they had sprayed it, and I said, really? And then I went and looked, and maybe 50%. So things are going to get become more difficult for kochia control, both for us and the agriculture. We had to stop spraying in August, July. Things were too dry. Chemicals don't work in those situations, just like the agriculture producers, they probably backed off spraying because why put out the expense if it's not going to work? So the chemical that we're using on that road top is activated by rain, so it needs a little bit of moisture. You're getting it as a pre-emergent, so it's very costly, but it's what's working for us now, and we're just going to keep doing that and maybe ramp it up a little bit. So each year we mark everything we spray.
In terms of, like you say, producers who are like forking out to spray for, say, kosher or whatever, where would you step in, like say with their chem following and they have a bad patch of kosher and they're not doing anything to control it? What's the steps in asking the producer to either control it or spray it? Or
Yeah, that's a good question and a difficult one this year. If it's not working, then what are you going to do? You're going to till, and then tilling late in the season is going to cause soil erosion. So it's a balancing act, and then that combined with the normal frost date in Lethbridge is basically the second week of September. We didn't have frost till last week, so we do get the odd complaint from a neighbor, and then we'll make a call and see what they're going to do. But this year, one complaint, I said, the guy was complaining about his neighbor, and I said, you need to go take a look through southern Alberta and see what's happening out there. The chemical's not working. The first guy to get his field off complaining about the neighbor because it looks clean, right? There was kochia all over southern Alberta that nobody could control. Guys were bailing it. We do have those conversations of what is your plan. We just make them conscious that folks are having issues sometimes with, and it depends on what you're seeding on how clean that field can be. It was grain fields that were concerned this year, and also anything that was being silaged. So we know the silage is going away, but some of those grain fields, we're making phone calls, and we're mostly doing, giving them a heads up, and then we can report back to the neighbor that if they're trying. When they're not trying and maybe not farming, that's when we step in at a larger level, and we will give a weed notice and push to have things done. So we get pretty good compliance. We've had, I think there was 5 weed notices this year, and most of them are on commercial lots and hamlets, but we are pushing. There's the same group of folks out there that are not farming as good, so we're pushing and pushing, always looking for, those issues to be resolved. So,
one thing is trying to get to it before it goes to seed. Otherwise, you're pretty much just seeding it, right?
That's right.
Especially with kochia, one plant can produce hundreds of thousands of seed, right? So,
And they become tumbleweeds and move all over.
yeah.
So I'll just talk about our process of how we control kochia. Like I said, it's that pre-emergent. So we spray 1/3 of the county. So we tackle that area first. Our mowers, we never hit that at the same time the mowers are coming through. We'll leave that for a month or 6 weeks, and then we'll get it with the mower. We'll do spot spraying throughout the county on these kochia hot spots. We're trying to hit it hard. Just our cycle of and then we come back and mow it again in the fall. Sometimes it doesn't look like it needs to be mowed, the grass. Then you'll come across a 100-yard area of kochia, so we're knocking those ones down. So that cycle keeps the kochia small, and we're trying to eliminate and reduce the seeds. But sometimes we're doing all that control effort, and then I look out in the field and I'm saying, well, we're going to have it again next year anyways, right? I mean, what you're seeing now is a lot of standing kochia or kochia that's been swathed and left, and guys will either bale that or run it through their combine when it dries up. Kochia never dries. This year, it did cure more than I've ever seen kochia cure, just from the dryness and turn different colors and whatnot. But kochia is going to be here for a while. There's a seed bed that's going to last a long time, and chemicals have not evolved to the degree. There's no new chemistries coming out, I don't believe, and that's what's needed. We'll see how it goes. So.
Is there any equipment like 3-point hitch mowers or stuff like that for producers to use if they don't have any themselves?
We don't. further them to some of the organizations in the county that do rent that type of thing. But I do get calls on that. Mowers are an expensive piece of machinery nowadays, and everybody runs machineries in different ways. So folks, there's a couple organizations that'll rent or do custom work that way. So.
I know of a sheep farmer, like, up near Carmody, he got in, he had limited land base, he got in by getting into neighbor's cereal fields and turning it into rat feed, but if you get it right moisture and turn it to silage fields, it actually makes good feed, you know, so.
Yeah, it is on our weed list, and we don't promote that, but when there's nothing else you can do, that has happened in the past, and you got to get the kochia at the right growth stage before it turns toxic. So it's actually a very good feed value to it. So
Not to talk about kochia too much, Gary, but it is one of the number one problem weeds for farmers. It's not currently rated as a noxious or.
in Lethbridge County, it is.
It
So
is, okay.
we've upgraded it. Yeah.
Okay.
So
The good
we-
news on the seed bed thing is that seed viability doesn't actually last as long as most things, so it's usually 2 to 3 years. The point that I want to bring up, though, is this is really a Southern Alberta issue. And then when it comes to developing projects on the research front, and even on the extension front, it's not often supported at the provincial level because of that regionality. I know that Dr. Charles Geddes, we were partnered with him on a project dealing with kochia, you know, because there's obviously a strong need for better approaches and better strategies, but he was actually asked for a full proposal and actually decided not to submit it because he just did not have the capacity to do it. So we're being faced with, you know, really no financial support to deal with one of our biggest problem weeds, and I'm not sure if there's an advocacy approach to help build a little bit of capacity on that front.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but a good point you made is that the seeds are not viable for that long. So if you can
If you can make it rain for 5 years, we might be okay. But on the plus side, you nailed it. I actually think kochia is probably one of our best cover crops right now that's going to stop erosion.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, it's a rough one, and every farmer I talk to is like that's their number one problem, but there just aren't the solutions out there for them, especially under drought.
Yeah, and you're right. You go up into the northeast section of the county where there's heavy crop failure out there. When nothing's growing, you grow a specialty crop and it fails, the kochia is there. And I'm like, I sure hope he doesn't work that in. And that's a strange way to think, but that's the truth this year because the land will start blowing out there.
Some of the issues I've seen, like the Roundup resistant, more like in the cornfields, I've seen stuff work by people.
Yeah. It's competing.
Silage, right, but
Mm-hmm.
the guys spray 3 times and
Yeah.
it just seems to be like fertilizer.
Another big concern too is pivot corners. It's not a big concern. Big feedlots of their pivot corners are sometimes getting bad, and then they've gone in and everybody's trying to control it. They're mowing now. I think there's been a lot of mowers bought in the last 3 years here. So everybody's trying, like you say. I don't know if we can advocate for anything because there's chemical companies that are looking for solutions that have got some pretty deep pockets, right? But there's got to be something. Is it the return of the Noble Blade one year? I don't know what folks are going to do. There's no resistance to steel, so I don't see that as the answer. But everybody's wondering the same thing. So moving on. So when we do more outside of when we're using the big spray trucks and doing a blanket spray, we mark everything we spray, whether it's leafy spurge or patches of whatever, and each year we go back and we get those next year because we know where they are, and we've got a continuous cycle. We like when that one goes away on the map. So, yeah, of course, each year we review our policies, and staff are trained. We have a pretty good training event that happens the first week of December every year, and they bring in experts to train staff on everything from weeds to pests, all the main things we do. So, goal area 4, support of the Animal Health Act. Usually nothing is done here. We don't want anybody phoning us telling us there's a reportable disease or finding anything. Recently, though, it's been the avian flu, so we haven't had any duties there. They call when it's prevalent in the county, which has been once, and they take care of the issue. We haven't had to get involved. Once in a while, they'll phone and ask. When it was prevalent in another county, they wanted some pressure washers to clean the barns and stuff, and they'll ask questions like that. But we're basically kept, out of the loop, and they have a website that reports where all the the issues are with that. So, roadside mowing. Between this and spraying, these are the two biggest things we do. In the past, we've intended to do 2,000 kilometers of road. That's twice a year. That's basically all our roads. This year, we didn't need to. We did some spot spraying in the dryland areas to the north. Didn't cover them all. We did cover all the dryland areas in the south twice because of weed pressures. I think folks do appreciate that and it looks nice. I mean, we're not doing it for aesthetics, but there are folks that like that as well. We have a whole crew that spends all summer mowing. This year, there was not a lot of grass in the first cut. It was very thin. So we got through it quicker. We shut down our mowers and moved to other tasks in late July and delayed the second cut because we knew we were going to get through that quick again too. Blades are a big expense for us, and this year we did not go through nearly as many blades because we weren't cutting anything. So the top, usually it's the bottom blades that you're hitting rocks. This year it's the top because the only thing that we're cutting was lots of kochia. So. Moving on to rental equipment. So we have various pieces of rental equipment that we rent out. Brilliant drills. We have a mulcher, a tree planter, chisel plow with lister shovels. That's for soil erosion. We lend that out. It creates a furrow like they do with beets or potatoes, so that stops old dryland fields from blowing. We have not used it. Mostly farmers are using shanks on cultivators to stop their soil erosion. Or if we have to go out, we're using the grader with the ripper. So they want a number there, so 15 producers. We cover that. The Brilliant drills, they did not see a lot of use. I don't think they moved too many times here in the fall. In a drought, people aren't planting grass. In the spring, there was some, and we did get a little bit of rain, but grass is hard to get established right now, and in our ditches as well. Last fall we seeded a road, and we use a hydro seeder, and it did not come up well. All it grew was solid kochia, so we're cycling back to mow those roads over and over until the grass gets established, and then we jump on it the first time we can with chemical. So they look a lot better once you mow them down, and then you can spray them. They stay that way, but if you're getting a few complaints about roads that have been seeded, it takes at least 3 years to get grass properly established for whether if you're a producer or the county, unless you have water. So moving on, this isn't necessarily to do with agriculture, but it's part of what our Ag Service Board does is we do park, cemetery, hamlet subdivision maintenance. So we circle through. We have one mower that specifically just makes circles around. We have a route and does all the hamlets and subdivisions. And then we, first week of July, we'll move on to the 4 cemeteries we have. And this year we didn't have to do the cemeteries twice because nothing grew back there. Also, we reestablish or renew playgrounds, and we renewed the Shaughnessy playground this year. Largest project that we've done. We had a little grand opening in September. Very well received by the community. It was needed. And we'll have a video at the end of this meeting that'll show that what we've done there. It gets citizens involved in their rural community, so they created a board and they helped develop what was going to go in there. They led the volunteers along with county staff that did the work there, and it's a good community builder, and it was awesome support with Shaughnessy this year, as we've had with most other communities as well. So that covers the legislative funding that we get for the county. We're given a grant of $163,000 for that portion of our work. The budget for that is well over $1 million. Covers some. We have to report back each year on what we do. So the next step will be the resource management. That's basically extension work that's done with Matthew Wells, and I'll invite him to come up and he'll cover this portion. For this portion, we're given $91,000. That covers $91,000. The total budget for that would be about $163,000. So it covers a substantial portion of what we're doing there. And with this program, it's a 5-year grant cycle, so we had to put this in. It's evolved to the work, and Matt's going to, follow our goals here, but he's also going to tell you what we're doing. The reality of what we're doing on the ground, because everything evolves. And it used to be a 3-year grant cycle, now it's 5. So things have changed. COVID have changed the way extension is done. So, Matt?
Is it on the same timeline as the ASP grant?
It is so. And one thing to note, there's a bunch of correspondence that's come through. People are thanking for the return of the funding level of the legislative portion. So the province cut that back to $142,000, and now they've returned it to the $163,000 level. But they're just giving back what we had previously. So they realized maybe that it was money well spent, I think. So, and the price of chemicals, the money that they're giving us doesn't go as far as things used to. So, Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Morning, everybody. I just have to hold. It's on. Okay, sweet. Yeah, so I'm Matthew Wells. I'll go over the goals. If I know your guys' documents you got, you're not able to see the strategy or the, I think it's performance measures. So if you do want to see those, just let me know. I'll keep on scrolling down. But typically, I'll just be reading off my paper here. So, and just going over what we've done in the last 2.5 years since I've been doing it. So the first goal is the delivering of environmental farm plans to Lethbridge County producers. We disseminate that through that EFP information through our websites, social media, the Rural Living and Ag Extension newsletter, workshops, ag events, and the watershed group meetings that we host. Since becoming a technician, I've had over 90 producers sign up for the program in the last 2.5 years. A lot of them are dairy producers, sugar beet producers, and potato growers. There are people that are looking for funding too, so more signing up. And they're looking for, in particular, the Resilient Agricultural Landscape Program under the SCAP program. So typically I do one-on-one with producers. I'll just go to their farmstead instead of hosting. We could host a workshop, but I like to meet the producers and just do one-on-one and interact with them. And it usually only takes about 2 hours. So recently I did help with a workshop here about a week ago in Tabor. They hosted a potato growers workshop for 3 days. So I helped for 2 days there. And then with the EFP itself too, I am a member of the operations committee. So with that, we typically meet, I think, 4 times a year. So we provide guidance on workbook content, workbook delivery, technician training, collaboration, and sustainable sourcing initiatives, producer and technician communications. And then with all the other goals too, so everything relates back to the EFP. So of the goals, this is the most important one for us. So
If we didn't do a lot of other work, the province would be happy with the amount of EFP work we do for that $91,000 we give. We do more EFPs than anywhere in the province.
So goal 2, continuing delivering the Canadian Agricultural Partnership Program. As you guys know, it's changed to the SCAP program. So with this program, we the same thing. We disseminate it through our Rural Living newsletter, social media, county website, and extension events. Producers will call about available funding or ask when completing their EFPs. But typically, I haven't helped any producers complete that form. It's pretty straightforward, and most of that funding too, they need an agrologist to sign off on it. So they'll have an agrologist help them. but they'll ask me and see what funding available and if their farming practices apply. So that's typically what goes on with this one. We also promote the on-farm climate action funding as well, and any other funding that I do find that is available. So those are the two main ones, though. And then the goal number 3, so it is involving nutrient management. So this one, same as before, it's put through our newsletters, website. We put together a bunch of videos, and we also, Lethbridge County hosts the nutrient management webinar series each year. We've done it this will be our 3rd year coming up. It's 3 days over 3 weeks, and it's usually on a Monday. And there are CCA credits available for producers that do sign up and participate in the videos. The videos are recorded and then placed on our YouTube channel. We have typically over each presentation or each day, I guess, we have typically around 100 producers participating. And then afterwards, once the videos are posted, we have around 150 to 200 views on each one. So the webinar series is doing really well. We always I put a survey out at the end of it too, just to get feedback on what people want to see, and we usually go off what producers want to see in those webinar series. So the Innovations in Ag workshop, we were supposed to host that this year. It was set for August 9th at the Broxburn Pond. Had to cancel due to the harvest starting early. But we did send out a survey and found that majority of producers would like to see it during the winter months of November and February.
So this one here, we're going to pause and maybe discuss a little further. We did not get anybody to sign up for that event, and it was mostly because of harvest. We think we had some pretty good speakers lined up. It was an event that was going to be held at Broxburn Park, the pond there. We're wondering, looking for a little direction. Is this something we should be doing? There are so many events during the summer. Even finding a date for this event was difficult. And then to have no one sign up. We were doing a nominal charge. We've never charged before and offered free lunch. This year we thought, if we're doing lunch, folks should have to pay to see if this information is worthwhile. It's a struggle. We're a little hesitant to put out money for something that doesn't happen, and it takes a lot of work to get something like this prepared. So we've thought of options of teaming up with other organizations, being a smaller part. With the work that Matthew does, environmental farm plans are ramped up. It's busy, and this gets crammed in there as well, and then not to succeed. We're really hesitant going forward, looking for a little direction. My suggestion would be we don't take this on ourselves anymore, and we take it on with a partner. We've had some discussions, just preliminary discussions we had with the college last year. They were having an event. We found in the end it wasn't going to be a good fit, but going forward, how do we get some of our messages out there with using someone else to bring the people? Because we're not succeeding at getting the people to come to county events. We've moved on from the in-person. Matthew does a lot of videos, and that is where we are succeeding. We're getting lots of hits, and people want those videos, whether it be trees, leafy spurge. We're working on one for soil erosion. Those are very well received. It's just the in-person. It's just where do you find the time to fit it in between everybody else's events? So we'll open that up to a little bit of discussion here.
So Matthew, you touched on this briefly about, you talked with a lot of the producers and they were suggesting that it be in non-harvest area, non-summer.
Yeah, the problem that we found was everybody's farmers, so dairy producers are always busy. Feedlot owners are always busy. There's never really a good time. So their suggestion was from November to February. And I think that was majority. And I know in the past we've hosted in September, and we've struggled even then to get producers to come out too.
in those events that we had in September, we loaded them up with college and university students because they were back in class. It wasn't a great format either. We wanted to just separate the producers, and if they wanted it, they came. Apparently, it wasn't, bad timing, and did they really have time for another event?
So does the board have any thoughts or comments on that?
John, maybe if I could just expand a little bit. So to contextualize maybe this in terms of a broader challenge that we have and something that we're working on as a municipality is, general level of engagement is difficult. We spent extensive resources to try and get engagement on economic development surveys and everything else, and the actual, I think we had 85 respondents out of 10,900 and something residents and ratepayers, and that was something that took a very concerted, targeted effort. And so we are in the process of building out a communications strategy right now as a municipality to capture all of these different areas. And so it is something that I think we're meeting with council on it next week, where we want to do a better job of less to try and build that audience and engagement and really focus on value versus quantity. And not that it'll help this group for this specific component, but I do think that this is a facet of that can funnel into that communication strategy. And if we want to maybe park this for the next board meeting, it might give us a better opportunity for, once we have council's general support on that strategy, then Matthew and Maddie can connect, can talk about what those items are and exactly what that would look like, and that might be more valuable. It won't help maybe some of the public-facing engagement events, but we feel really strongly that we need to build that level of engagement first to get that audience to then in turn get a better uptake at those more hands-on type sessions or interactions.
That makes perfect sense. Yep. Any other comments?
Well, this is my business. It's definitely not an easy one. I think without consistent dates where there's a habit created, and I think COVID also messed that up as well, is I think we need to focus on the relationship piece. So I was actually looking forward to your event and would have come, but I maybe didn't register, sorry. Anyways, first of all, I want to say you're doing a good job on all of that. This is a really competitive environment. Even amongst the friendlies, there's honestly competition for people's attention. The one thing that I don't want to see us miss out on as a county is that opportunity to build relationships. We tend to think that we're going to draw people in with a topic, and it's not always the right way to do it. So I think if we took more of a focus on, and inviting council to these events as well, there's an advocacy opportunity for each event, right? And, I think I'm proud that this is the biggest ag county in Alberta. So if we can sort of take that opportunity to highlight that and also build in relationships, bring in the economic development piece. If we can find a way that you can host an event that it's not just look at me, what I have to share and build my brand, but there's an area that we can kind of depoliticize things but bring everyone together at the same time. I think there's some opportunity. So I don't want you guys to shy away from having some sort of opportunity. I think you going out and meeting farmers, and that's a huge opportunity to build relationships with them too, and then eventually you can leverage that, right, and say, look, hey, I'm hosting this event, what do you need, what do I need to do to get you there, right?
Yeah, funny enough, I did. And everyone was just harvesting.
Yeah, so
week
you did
before,
things
so.
right. It was bad timing, and
Yeah.
I think the topics were good too, so I wouldn't feel bad about it. It happens.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned that maybe partnering up with agencies or other committees or whatever in the county. I think that'd probably be a better strategy going forward. I think the different producer groups that exist within the county and the province, I know I'm a little bit narrow-sighted in what I do. Alberta Milk has general meetings twice a year, that rotate through the province, as well as they do a research meeting once a year that rotate through the province. I mean, you not necessarily have to be across the province, but you could approach them. I'm sure pork producers and so forth have similar meetings that where you can come in, and they have brought in different aspects of agencies to talk to the producers. So I think not having a lot of cost on your part and a little bit of time commitment, like usually they bring them in for 45 minutes or an hour and a half, whatever you require, right, would be an opportunity to extend your message, right, versus the time commitment to put on your own meeting, right? And we usually get a very good attendance at these fall and spring meetings, so it's, I think the idea of partnering with different groups would be maybe an idea to go forward with.
Yeah, for sure.
Dan, if I can just ask a clarifying question on that. So you're suggesting that we actually go where they're already hosting meetings, and then you've got a captive audience that's already been there and assembled?
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than trying to assemble our own meeting. Yeah. Any more thoughts on that topic?
This is maybe down the road, but I've always thought, and the new exhibition is a great opportunity, is, you know, I'd like to see more of a farm tech of the South. It's easy to say partner with others, but in practice, it's not that easy. I don't know why. I think it's just the environment that we're in right now is everybody's, you know, their resources are cannibalized, so they really have to be careful. Like what Cole's saying is just have one big event where you're maximizing your value. But I think that's something to consider, and I think we've really not taken advantage of the irrigated focus too, right? Like you know, sure, the college and Alberta Ag had their irrigated crop production thing, but we don't have anything that really focuses in on the high value irrigated sector, you know, including the livestock side. Like Tiffin's gone now too, right?
Yeah, and we used to take part in that, and
Yeah.
previous extension folks have sat on these committees, and that's a good way to meet people. But yeah, there is the irrigation conference. It's every couple of years, right?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that's the one, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking longer term, bigger picture here.
Yeah. So moving forward, I think we need to wait for our communication strategy to come out, and then when we see what's involved there, we look at partnering. That's what I would suggest. And, you know, the survey, people fill out the survey and they say they would like to come, and it would be better suited for November, wintertime.
Yeah.
There's a lot of competition in the wintertime. It's way more intense in the wintertime. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we're, yeah. Then you're trying to dig in and establish something. I mean, there's already places to go there well established, so.
Hey, if I could interrupt just for a moment and just sort of change gears on this. Matthew, I'm not sure how much more time you have on your presentation, but we do have a delegation here for 10 a.m. Greg, and I would assume that you're Greg. Yes. Yeah. Greg, just being cognizant that your time is valuable, I just wanted to sort of see where we're at with this particular topic and how close we are to wrapping up, and maybe we set this aside so that you can do your thing. Or
What do you got left, Matt? 5 minutes?
I got 5 to 10 minutes, yeah.
Greg, can we indulge you for an extra 5 minutes? Okay, much appreciated, thank you.
Okay. I won't, yeah, I'll be quick. Continuing on, we do presentations on sustainable practices. So once a year, we organize a group of presenters to visit a high school for an afternoon. Last year it was Iron Springs High School. This year it was Coaldale Middle School. We've received really great feedback, especially from the students who were engaged, and even the teachers were extremely impressed. So we usually do a tour with the college and university students. Last year was at the McCain facility. And we put that together for them. This year, just with the workload increase this year, so it got pushed back, but we will look to do that again next year. And then the videos, we are currently working on a soil erosion video that Gary mentioned, and we have several partnerships with that. That's going to be coming out or finalized here at the end of the year. Next year's video will be addressing drought. And then we also do have do interviews with producers in the field. So last year we did one with Rod Lanier of Hemp Hub, touring his facility. That was received really well. And this year we're looking at doing one with a potato producer. So moving on to goal 4. Improving riparian health. So we are working with the Old Man Watershed Council on Cows and Fish on promoting riparian health. We coordinate with the chair of the Old Man Watershed Mainstem Group for workshops and sending out information to producers. That one we do once a year. We typically have producers presentations for the day, and we go to one of the riparian sites along the Old Man. And then lastly, we are utilizing the Little Bow riparian site as a sustainable practice site for not only riparian health, but for sustainable agriculture practices and stewardship opportunities. Any questions on that? So the last goal is goal 5. This one is working with feedlots, manure haulers on the AOPA guidelines. This one is tied closely with goal 3, which was nutrient management. We promote various information over different formats, including newsletters, social media, website, and video. In the nutrient management webinar videos or series, we are branching out with our own videos, but manure and nutrient management planning is always included, and especially considering that's an important topic for our producers in this area. So that is it.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Any other questions on the presentation?
I appreciate the presentation. I'm just wondering, is there going to be an opportunity to talk about that extension position under the G correspondence, or?
Yes, we are. We've got of all the correspondence, we're going to cover that one extensively.
Sounds good. I'll leave it for then.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming.
And if we could, I'm just going to take a 30-second little reset. We're ready to continue. We're on to F1, a delegation for Greg Daniels, Senior Plant Pathology Technologist. Greg, thank you very much for coming. We appreciate that. I think we'd maybe just start with a round of introductions so that you can put some names to faces here. Jeremy?
Chairman Wixon, Director of Operations for Lambda-Cyhalothrin. Dan Chapman, Member at Large.
Ken Cole's also member at large.
Lauren Hickey, Counselor.
I'm John Curvis, Deputy Reeve and Vice Chair of ASB.
Logan Miller, Member at Large.
Candace Robinson.
Cole Beck, Lethbridge County CAO.
Thank you. Greg, the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, I'm Greg Daniels, the Senior Plant Pathology Technologist with Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation at the Crop Diversification Center in Brooks. I work for Dr. Michael Harding, who runs the plant pathology program, and I work alongside Shelley Barkley from the entomology program and Dr. Chris Neeser from the weeds program. So I'm going to talk today about the field crop disease monitoring and surveillance program out of Brooks. I won't be covering the insects and weeds, but just the plant pathology side of things. And before we get started, our program basically surveys for crop diseases in about 1,600 fields a year, of which 2 of our major surveys, the Wheathead survey and canola survey that we run, about 85, that covers about 1,000 fields, and 85% of those fields are samples that are submitted by AAAF fieldmen, assistants, and staff of the different counties and MDs. So we greatly appreciate all the help that we get from the counties because we couldn't do those 2 surveys without the help. We also work a lot with the Alberta Plant Health Lab in Edmonton for analysis of our samples. We work with several Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada scientists in their programs who both submit samples to us and also do some of the analysis for disease for us. We work with the U of A, Olds College, and not listed here is the Canadian Grain Commission that we do a lot of sample submissions to as well. So very quickly, I'm just gonna go through the agenda for what I'm going to talk about. Basically, I'll just very, very briefly go into the Pest Act and our provincial mandate for disease surveillance. I'll do the results of our major crop disease surveys for the last year or 2, and then I'll specify and go into some of the Lethbridge County results from both last year as well as some of the preliminary stuff from this summer. So the Pest Act is just the enabling legislation that prevents the introduction and spread of pests of agricultural concern. They have a very specific mandate, which includes the minister's ability to conduct surveys, which is what we do, for the purpose of preventing the establishment, controlling and destroying a pest, and preventing and reducing damage caused by a pest or nuisance, which is a pretty broad mandate. But the list of pests is actually quite short, the declared list. So the items listed in green, blackleg and clubroot and canola, dwarf bunt, carnal bunt, and flag smut in cereals, stem and bulb nematode, and white rot in onions and garlic. Those are the pests that we survey for on a regular basis. Those listed in yellow, bacterial ring rot, fire blight, head smut in corn, and potato wart are all diseases that we rely more on the Alberta Plant Health Lab and notification and disease submissions from our network of collaborators, whether it's ag fieldmen, agronomists, industry, what have you. So our major plant surveys, our focus primarily is on the declared pests that affect crops in the province, but we do have a secondary focus on disease or organisms that may become declared pests either because they're approaching our borders or have been introduced here and are on the rise. And then finally a focus on organisms that can have a significant economic impact within the province. So we try and hit more than one of those foci with every survey that we do. So for example, the Wheathead survey that we run, that I mentioned that the fieldmen assist with, it basically studies about 450 fields a year, which is about 1% of the wheathead, or wheat fields that are grown in the province every year. And within those fields, we collect 500 heads for examination. We examine for carnal bunt and dwarf bunt, which are the 2 regulated pests. Fusarium graminearum used to be on the Pest Act, and it's been delisted within the last couple of years, but we still look at Fusarium head blight and Fusarium graminearum in specific, just due to its economic impact potential. We now are looking at black chaff, which is the head form of bacterial leaf streak, which is a new disease in southern Alberta that's on the rise. We look at ergot and aster yellows, which affects all kinds of crops within the province, but is very easily visually seen on wheat heads. Alberta Agriculture also runs a foliar survey on wheat that we do ourselves, looking for flag smut primarily, but also, as I mentioned, looking at bacterial leaf streak and wheat streak mosaic virus, which are both on the rise in the province. We look at fungal leaf spots in general, and we also assist with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's stripe rust survey. In canola, which is our other major survey, we also cover about 400 fields a year, looking at blackleg and clubroot specifically as the regulated pests, but also now with a focus on verticillium stripe, which is growing on the prairies, and our long-term foe, sclerotinia stem rot, or white mold in beans, basically. And then we survey two other main surveys. Onion and garlic we only survey once every 3 to 5 years, looking for stem and bulb nematode and white rot in onions as the two regulated pests. But we also do an annual pea survey where we're looking at root rot complex, mainly due to the increase in Aphanomyces root rot throughout the province, which is a potential up-and-comer, as well as Ascochyta mycosphaerella blight and bacterial blight as well. So going into the
Hey,
specific.
Greg, sorry.
Oh, sure. go
What
ahead.
do you mean by potential up-and-comer? I thought that it was widespread.
Well, it is widespread, but it's got a potential for further spread, basically, into other pea growing regions, and also the severity increase that we are worried about. So it is widespread. It wasn't really, Aphanomyces wasn't really discovered until just a few years back, and it has the potential that it's been here for quite a long time, but it's just a recent discovery. And so at this point, we're just monitoring it to see exactly how widespread Aphanomyces is and whether or not it's increasing or decreasing in its presence in the province. With that program, we mostly work with Shama Chatterton's group here in Lethbridge. So going into the specifics of the surveys and some of the provincial results, clubroot being one of the bigger disease stories in the last 10 years, or 15 years, I guess we're at now. Basically, it deforms the roots, causes the bad transport of water and nutrients throughout the plant, causes early dying in the crop and decreased yield as a result. We mostly survey for this and then submit the results to Dr. Stephen Strelkov at the University of Alberta, who generates a map of clubroot in the province. The epicenter, which is in the county of Leduc, where they've got 1,500 fields, basically. We're now running very close to 4,000 fields in the province that are clubroot infested, and it is spreading north and south. We've now got fields in northern Sunrise, Saddle Hills counties, as well as down in Nehill and Starland, Wheatland counties as well. There has been an infection in Newell that's been there since 2005, but it was a separate infection event, and it doesn't seem to be attached to the main clubroot outbreak in central Alberta, but clubroot, which is mostly handled by resistant varieties, is still spreading every year. So if we look at the fields in the province, we're now about 3.5% of all canola fields in Alberta are infested with clubroot, and it's not slowing down. It seems to be increasing. We definitely will be going over 4,000 fields this year. Not sure exactly where we're going to end up until we get the results of the survey. So briefly, I'm just going to mention that.
Can I just ask on the prevention aspect, as I'm learning some of this myself?
Generally, prevention comes down to sanitation of equipment, not moving soil around. Using resistant varieties is the most important thing, and preventing basically green bridges of disease, things in your fields such as weeds that are in the same sort of family as shepherd's purse, stinkweed, those kinds of things that can also be infected with clubroot and carry the disease forward. Also, pushing rotations as far apart as you can. I know that the Canola Council is recommending 3 years. We look at 4 or 5 as potentially even better. In southern Alberta, that's easier to accomplish than it is in central and northern Alberta, where they have fewer crops available to them. But pushing rotations, resistant varieties, almost all of the central Alberta counties now are using resistant clubroot varieties just because there's no other way to avoid a train wreck in their fields.
Thank you.
Briefly, I'm going to go into just some of the terminology I'm going to use. When we look at diseases, we basically reference prevalence, incidence, and severity. And so prevalence is basically the proportion of fields overall that have a disease. Incidence is the percentage basically of plants within a field that would have the disease. And the severity is basically whatever scale that you're measuring it by, what is the proportion of disease according to the maximum on that scale, which is usually a dead plant. So as I go forward, I'll be talking about those quite a bit. So the other part of the clubroots, or the canola survey that is of primary importance, is the blackleg portion of the survey. This is actually how we survey for blackleg. Very easy disease to spot when you sever the plant at the just below the crown. So this disease formerly caused a serious ring canker around the plant, which would basically kill the plant and cause significant disease. Now, almost all canola varieties are blackleg resistant to some degree, but they use different technologies basically to limit the growth of the disease in different ways. So you can get if you look at the stems there, you can see that they actually appear quite healthy despite the presence of blackleg in the stem. So before I go into the incidence data, basically blackleg occurs in almost every canola field in the province. When we look at the prevalence of the disease, it's in greater than 90% of the fields every time that we survey. So if you do look at your crop, you will find it virtually every time. But the incidence, right now it's running about 25 to 30% of plants within each field that you'll see some form of blackleg. Usually it's very minimal, but depending on the results, which I'm going to get into here soon, you can get really large severity boosts. This year, our incidence from our current survey is running about 26-27%, which is pretty comparable to last year. But if we look at the severity of it, specifically, for example, there's a really dark field right here where the severity is quite high. So the way that blackleg works is there are different races of blackleg, and there are also different resistance genes. And so some of the blackleg races are able to get around particular resistance genes. And so if you get a situation where the race that you have in your field is not compatible with the resistance gene in your crop, you can still get a very high level of blackleg. And so when you see the dark fields, those are often either canola varieties that are grown that don't have resistance to blackleg, or the resistance doesn't match. So this is the survey results for the last 2 years. As you can see, most of the fields have very low blackleg severity, but there are spotty areas where blackleg crops up every year. So each year when we sample for blackleg, we'll take these blackleg cross sections and send them to Dr. Gary Pang at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in Saskatoon, and he race types them all, and he's now presenting data for each crop district on the prairies as to what the dominant races are. You can also, through Discovery Seed Labs, they have a program where you can sample your own fields for blackleg and submit to them, and they'll tell you what your actual race in your field is, and from that you can make recommendations towards your resistant variety for the next time you grow canola. Sclerotinia, very briefly, very weather dependent, and so as you can see, this is this year's data. Very, very low incidence in southern and central Alberta, and almost nothing. Mind you, we're only looking at main stem lesions because we don't get the entire plant when we receive samples from the egg fieldman. But main stem lesions very low, except for in the southern Peace region this year. And looking at our Sclerotinia incidence year over year, it's been at a very low level throughout the province for the last 4 or 5 years. I assume that this year it will probably be even lower than in 2022 data. Briefly going into wheat diseases, fungal leaf spots, such as tan spot, septoria. There's a wide variety of fungal leaf spots that we look at just as a group. Basically, looking at the prevalence and incidence, basically it's in every field and they're on almost every plant. So what we look at mainly with leaf spots is trying to keep track of severity, which usually is weather dependent. And so you can see each year very high levels in certain particular regions, mainly controlled with foliar fungicides and proper timings. Fusarium head blight, which used to be on the Act as Fusarium graminearum, I'm going to look at in both as Fusarium head blight as a whole, as well as graminearum specifically. So these are elevator samples coming from the Canadian Grain Commission that are taken every year. You could see up until 2014 there was a steady rise, and then it just kind of got into a very up and down situation. Very low in 2021. We don't have data for 2022, but I believe it was about the same as 2021.
No.
Sure.
That sort of very dramatic sine curve there, what do you attribute that to?
Well, there's a lot of reasons why things changed back in around 2014-15. That's when people started looking at things like irrigation timing, foliar fungicide application timing. There was a lot of research that was being thrown into different ways to manage the disease. And it's just been very irregular weather as well. And so not sure exactly what the reason for it is. It's just that I'm assuming as well that the elevator samples from the Canadian Grain Commission tend to be very biased towards the counties that are submitting the most samples. And so depending on what the regional weather is like compared to if there's the ability to spray or not, if there's a lot of storms at anthesis, those kinds of things, it can lead to increases and decreases in disease. But when we get into really dry years, you see very low levels of FDKs. Looking specifically at Fusarium graminearum, because you're concerned more about the toxin levels in that, this is our survey results from the last 2 years of the survey. In the past, we've seen very large amounts of the red dots basically in southern and south central Alberta, as well as coming over the Saskatchewan border into like the Vermilion River, Wainwright area, moving towards Edmonton. But now we are starting to see it being a little bit more patchy, but also now we're even starting to see positive samples up in the Peace region and northwest of Edmonton, which wasn't necessarily true in the past. So it is still spreading. We'll go into bacterial leaf streak is a relatively new disease in southern Alberta. This is just the total number of fields in the province that have been observed that had it. So in about 2017, it started to come in, started to be noticed, and there's been a slow rise ever since. Basically, it's very similar to other fungal leaf spot diseases where it affects photosynthetic capacity in the leaves. But in the case of bacterial leaf streak, it also makes exudates that can spread through aphids, can spread through wind and rain and storm events, but primarily bacterial leaf streak is a seed-borne disease. Looking at this year, or last year's results, we're up to about 25 fields total in the province, and I actually just received the survey results yesterday afternoon for this year, and there's another 4 or 5 fields within the province that we've found through monitoring, and there's also some other fields where people have submitted samples to the Alberta Plant Health Lab. So we will see that cross the 30, possibly even the 40 field threshold this year.
Can I just ask a question? So, I mean, aside from the few that have seen large variability, most of these we're seeing kind of a trending uptick in this. What is the confidence interval that you guys have? Is there variability that, is there more awareness, things are getting reported? Are you surveying for things more specifically? Or is it actually that everything is trending up, or are we just capturing more as time goes on and it becomes more prevalent? We're making more of a concerted effort at trending it.
It kind of depends on the disease. Some of the diseases are definitely becoming more frequent, and our actions are trying to slow them down, but we're not necessarily successful, such as clubroot. Bacterial leaf streak is one of those diseases where if it comes in as a point source, it will slowly spread until you can't do anything about it. And so that is a disease that's very common in the United States, especially in the Dakotas. And they struggle with it every year. Things like stripe rust, they blow in from the Pacific Northwest, so you don't really have much control over it. Fungal leaf spots are just here. They've been here for a long time. They're not going anywhere. All we can do is kind of monitor to see if they're becoming more severe or not. And what we're looking for specifically with the Blackleg survey I was mentioning is what we're examining for is signs of resistance breakdown. And so if we can maintain surveying it and seeing that it's going to stay at a low severity level for a long period of time, then we'll gauge that as a success.
So is monitoring a contributing factor to the increase, or is it just we actually are seeing effectively an increase in
with both the wheat and the canola disease surveys, we've been running these surveys now for 10 to 15 years on a regular basis, and so the increase that we're seeing is actual increase.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the success stories are fewer than the non-success stories with disease. Looking at pea root rot, basically root rot is one of those things that occurs in almost every pea field as well, but this is one of those success stories where we're seeing now a decrease in incidence within the fields. So incidence has been going down steadily for the last decade. There have been some peaks and valleys, but for the most part it is on a trending downwards slope. But if we look at this year's results from southern Alberta, if you look at the corridor between here and Grassy Lake, we are seeing some of the highest levels of root rot in the province. We've been working recently with Norterra Foods, formerly Bonduelle, and we've been contacting their growers to include succulent peas as well in the survey. So this is succulent and dry peas. It's the first time that we've run succulent peas the last 2 years, I think, and so we'll be carrying on with those growers as well. Actually, I should go back to that one. So this is what I mean by a severity scale. So basically the scale for root rot is a measurement scale where you examine it and it rates between a 1 and a 7. So 7 being basically a dead plant and 1 being a healthy plant. So when you start seeing really dark circles in the 6 to 7 zone, you are looking at the possibility of, under drought conditions especially, a really bad situation for the grower.
I think I'd like to make a comment on the positive outlook potential. We love looking at graphs. If it's going up, it's good. If it's going down, or the other way around. If it's going up, it's bad. I think this is actually not as positive a story as we'd like it to be, because there are less farmers growing peas and lentils because of this disease. So then the surveys now are probably looking more at peas on better rotation land and things like that. So there's a lot of intricacies to the surveys, but I mean, the surveys themselves are invaluable in tracking what's going on. But like this Aphanomyces one is a big deal for southern Alberta. It's another example of a southern Alberta issue like kochia that probably isn't getting the attention it deserves. Clubroot, and then, is an Edmonton thing, so they tend to get more resources put towards it. So anyways, that's just a comment.
I think to your point as well, I think what we're also seeing is where Aphanomyces was hit the hardest was up in the Drumheller area originally. A lot of growers have gotten out of peas in that area, or at least have pushed their rotations to very long rotations just to avoid particular fields, and there's been a lot of crop insurance issues up there as well. So. Microsphaerella ascochyta, very briefly, it's very weather related as well, and you can see it's got wild swings every year, where the prevalence is all over the map, and so is the incidence. This year's results, southern Alberta, not a lot, just because of the weather. Very low severities at least. We'll see what the incidences are once we crunch all the numbers this year. So getting into Lethbridge County specifically, for the last few years, I've been sending a survey report to each of the counties and MDs that we survey in. So this has been submitted or sent to Gary at the your ag fieldman. So basically, this is the 2022 survey report map. So we did weed head survey, canola survey, and pea survey in the county last year. He will have the individual field results, but these are just the county averages. So no bunts and smuts were observed, just a trace of ergot in a quarter of the samples. But we did see Fusarium graminearum in a couple of fields last year. That one you can't do an incidence and severity on because of the way it's tested. For canola, 100% of our fields that were sent to us had blackleg in them, 15% of the plants, but a very low severity of 0.26 on average out of a rating scale of 5. No clubroot observed and no verticillium seen either, which both are good news. For the pea survey, 100% of the fields had root rot, 93% incidence, which is very high, and a quite high severity on average of 4.5 out of 7, which is pretty much the highest of any of the counties in the province. So 2023, very similar. I'm not sure why there seems to be an allergy to picture butte, because on both maps there's no survey results from around there, but I think people have a tendency to stick to the main highways. But looking at the results, for canola, blackleg was in 60% of the fields, incidence down a little bit, severity down a little bit as well. No clubroot again. Verticillium, the samples are still out for analysis right now. We did not visually observe any verticillium in the county of Lethbridge, but what we have been doing this year and last year is anything that's kind of suspect as potentially blackleg or potentially verticillium, we send for lab testing. And so far, everything's come back negative. We've never, as part of this survey, observed verticillium stripe yet. But about 10% of the overall samples from the survey have been sent out for verticillium testing, just to be on the safe side.
How does your severity scale work?
Severity scale for blackleg is, if you recall back on the slide where it showed the picture of the cross sections of the stems, basically a 5 would be a dead stem, a 4 would be the entire stem is black, 3 would be 3/4, 2 would be half, 1 would be a quarter. So basically, based on the cross section of the stem that has blackleg in it, that's how much of the transport capacity of the plant is affected.
So on that P for root, that is.
So for root rot, it's very similar. It's basically on the reduction in root mass from a 1 to a 7. So a 7 would basically be a completely dead root that's just a thread, going all the way down to a completely healthy root system with nodulization. So reduced nodules, increased coloration. There's a very specific scale for each disease. And unfortunately, I haven't surveyed peas this year, and so I don't remember exactly what the pea root rot scale is, but basically the root mass declines as you go up the scale. Yeah. Ascochyta was in 40% of the fields, 12% incidence, and a 1 on the severity scale, so not terrible. A little bit more than last year, but not a lot. And we don't really have any wheat head or foliar results to report to you. The only thing that I can tell you so far is that based on the bacterial leaf streak and white streak mosaic virus samples that were submitted, there wasn't anything found in the county of Lethbridge. That doesn't mean there aren't any fields, because As I mentioned earlier, we only do 1% of the fields, and so it's unfortunately the best picture we can get based on the amount of work that it is to do these fields. For the wheat head survey, for example, by looking at 500 fields per year, we're scanning a quarter of a million wheat heads every year for disease. So to go above 1% is pretty difficult, both for us and for the county staff.
Question, like
Yeah.
in the Lethbridge County on those, like, you be surveying like what's being combined, not fields that are being silaged?
Generally, when we survey canola, we either take it just before or just after harvesting. For the wheat, we do it from a standing crop, so it can be either or. But generally, we are trying to thresh out the seed, so yeah, we would be trying to go to full maturity.
Okay, cause yeah, like last year, I would say, like, cause that's wheat and rye is becoming a common rotation now within the fields for silaging. And like last year especially, the prevalence was quite high.
Okay. Yeah, we also have unfortunately only been able to focus on wheat. Occasionally, we have run barley samples as part of that as well. But because of the way the act is written with the bunts as being the primary focus, we focus on wheat. But it is worth mentioning, and I'll bring that up with Mike when I talk to him next. Because we could potentially expand, especially the foliar surveys, to include other grains. So finally, our annual crop disease surveys are submitted to the Canadian Phytopathological Society. They publish what they call the Canadian Plant Disease Survey every year. And so it is the summary of all of the surveys done for the entire country. And so there is a fairly large Alberta proportion to it. And so that is available online at phytopath.ca/CPDS. And they have it available for free online, but you can also order the book if you'd like it. And that's really all I have for you. If you have any further questions. Sure.
What is the recommended rotation for pulses? Is it still 4 years, or is it?
It is still 4 years.
Okay.
I know that up in Nehill County, they were trying to recommend 5 to 6, and some have even gone to 7.
Yeah, I've heard if you do get some of these diseases, like they recommend not growing it for 8 to 10 years, depending on the severity, I suppose. But
No, it's when you recommend a rotation, we try not to.
Mhm.
We try to let the industry try and work its way through it. I know that for blackleg and clubroot, there has been a lot of discussion back and forth and a lot of argument back and forth and different science presented. And so the biggest thing to us is that try and make it as large as you can. The other thing to avoid is green bridges wherever you can. So if you have a disease of cereals, control your grassy weeds. If you have a disease of clubroot, control your cruciferous weeds. Try and avoid, with sclerotinia, for example, going from a bean rotation into a canola rotation and back and forth, because it affects both organisms or both plants. And use resistant varieties wherever you can. So.
Oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
This might be a bit of an off-the-record question too, if you want to turn off your mic. So as the ASB committee is an advocating committee, so obviously we have ASB conference coming up here in January, there will be opportunities to obviously advocate for this area. The focus of what Alberta Ag does right now. So Southern Alberta is the largest, Lethbridge County's GDP for agriculture is astronomical compared to the rest of the province. In some cases, I think Southern Alberta as a whole probably represents, would I be not fair saying 75% of the ag production of the province?
No.
No.
You'd be double the next.
No, I mean as an overall for cash.
For Southern Alberta, not just Lethbridge.
Not just Lethbridge.
We'd be a good percentage, but it wouldn't be that high.
Okay. No, well, okay, well, I'm saying southern
It's
Alberta
still
as a
high,
whole.
though.
It's still extremely
Yeah.
high, yeah. So with that, and I mean, even one of your comments was, you know, there is a lot of focused research around Edmonton, because that's where the politicians are. Is southern Alberta getting?
I don't think I said that. I did not criticize any politicians.
Is southern Alberta getting the attention it needs for this kind of research versus as like dollars follow dollars, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's one thing to say private industry, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of investment in this area, but there's also that question of, you know, I mean, the province does this, they're like, well, we'll just spread it out all over.
Yeah.
Well, like, but if this area is your focus point, and this is the area that's the highest productivity, your highest productivity area should get more focus point, more research funding.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. All into equality, but then there's also it's an economic driver and it's a social driver.
I think the great equalizer is that we try very hard to do our surveys based on the percentage of fields that are grown for that crop. And so because southern Alberta has such a large proportion of, for example, the wheat that's grown in the province, it gets the lion's share of attention when it comes to the wheat survey. For example, a county, say Lac St. Anne County, just as an example, will maybe do two samples in Lac St. Anne, and we'll do 27 in Vulcan. So it's very much proportional to what's grown where. The pea survey, the wheat survey are very much started out primarily as southern Alberta surveys that have grown to include the entire province. Is there enough? That's a difficult question. I know that we have a limited resource base ourselves, and so there are crops that we don't survey for that we would like to. For example, we'd like to do a lot more work with potatoes, which are primarily a southern Alberta disease issue. And I know that a lot of these diseases that are new and coming in, such as bacterial leaf streak, wheat streak, mosaic virus, they are coming into southern Alberta first. And so I think for the first time this year, we've seen a bacterial leaf streak sample, though from northeastern Alberta, which is a very new situation. So as a provincial government employee, I have to be cognizant of both things. One is that we have a responsibility to everyone in the province. The Peace region, for example, has been kind of neglected for a long period of time when it comes to surveying, just because of how far away it was for anybody to go up there and survey it. Since CDC Beaver Lodge closed down, what was that, 25 years ago? Is it still open?
I can.
Oh, okay. But the provincial side of it, we haven't had a presence up there, so we've really been trying to focus in doing as much in the piece as we can. But there's a reason that all of our survey teams are based out of Brooks and not Edmonton, because most of the work to be done is here. We have more variety of crops and a lot more value, like you mentioned. So we'd always like more resources, but
Since you accuse Greg of it, and this is Greg's program is survey only. They're actually precluded from doing research. We used to participate more with Mike on research, but since all of the changes, they're really kind of tying the hands of the resources that are left within the provincial government, because there's not a lot left in the provincial. They basically hacked and left. These guys are the lone survivors, really, of providing good value to farmers, and at that, they're often not allowed to participate in a lot of even extension events. So I was happy to see Greg here, to be honest. Now that's starting to change, but survey is one component of a much bigger challenge that's going on right now as far as capacity.
And that's essentially my larger question, right? I mean, there's one thing about surveying information and having that information, but then it's on the prevention side. The other research components that need to follow along with that.
Perfect. Well, any more questions for Greg? All Wonderful. Well, Greg, thank you very much. We do appreciate your time, and we understand that it is a commitment to come talk with us, and it is very informative to us, and it is a resource that we appreciate. So thank you very much, and drive safe.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Take care.
Yep, see you later, Ken.
Take 5 minutes?
You want to take 5?
Take a 5-minute break or a couple
Yeah.
minute break? Okay.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We are just going to move back a step here into the Supervisors and Agriculture Service Report so that it can conclude some of the items that we weren't able to get to before our delegation. So, Gary, Matt, it's all on you.
Yeah, one point we did not make is the newsletter, and I think Matt would like to talk about that piece before we move on.
Yeah, so since I've stepped into the role, it's changed quite a bit, and we're always adapting the newsletter and being progressive with it. But we've received really good feedback with it, especially from producers, industry people, organizations. I know Alberta government and those that are working with EFP are watching the newsletter. Same with the videos. And we've even reached out to professors in Ontario that are extremely pleased with it. So,
yeah, we've really like how our newsletter has evolved. It once was totally focused on nutrient management. We didn't find there was a lot of uptake, so we added a variety of things from gardening to history to everything. And if that attracts people to look at what the grant pays us to do, we think that's great. But that's why every issue is balanced out for our needs of things that we have to do to get our resource management grant. So some of them, why are we doing those? It's because we're covered under the grant, and then some of the more interesting ones are just for, interest. So.
and it's a great way to include other organizations too. We've reached out to other organizations that haven't been included in the newsletter in the past, and they too quite enjoy it. So.
Are you finding that you're getting more positive feedback from the distribution of this and people, more readership? Or is there a way to actually even track that?
It's a lot of it's word of mouth. We have done surveys in the past, and we've seen an uptick, but it's nothing crazy. So a lot of it's just word of mouth. When I go to see producers in the conducting EFPs, in the past when I first started, they didn't know we did a newsletter. Now there's people that I come in and I always ask, "Have you seen our newsletter?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, and they've actually read it and they actually got it on their table." So.
And with the new communication strategy, we'll be looking into how we present that as well. So.
So, any questions in that regard?
No, not on this specifically, but just on the reporting piece. I don't know if now would be the time to speak to that or ask.
Sorry,
So just on the reports, like if I could just ask them, like the reports that Gary and Matthew provided, could I just ask a couple questions? Maybe of the the board? So one of the things, and Jeremy and I have been chatting about this, and I think there's kind of an evolution of ASB and their role in advocacy as well as how progressive we want to be. I just wanted to maybe ask, as far as the primary objectives in those reports, is there any way or any appetite that we could look at some partnerships? I'm specifically thinking like one that came to mind with the COSHA, whether it's an industry partner, whether it's the U of L or the college. Could we do some things where we do some research on timing of spraying, what the moisture level needs to be for ground penetration for spraying COSHA? Can we test pre-soak conditions and we do some spraying and try and capture some information where we could then in turn take that and strategize on how we get ahead of some of these things. So whether that is subsidizing herbicides at a certain time of year, or we do a communication strategy and an initiative to just try and help us get ahead of some of these challenges. So, I mean, that's one example. I mean, it could be advocacy from what we just heard from Greg too, about sterilizing and cleaning farm equipment. Maybe that prevents the spread of disease, whatever those things might be. And so maybe this is a broader philosophical question to the Ag Service Board, but also maybe some specific opportunities for us to look at this a little bit differently or more progressively in how we approach some of those key objectives.
Why are you looking at me here?
Well, Cole, that's partly why I'm part of the Ag Service Board is to bridge a gap between farming smarter and what's going on. I think I've got some advocacy goals, if you hadn't noticed. But absolutely, there's always those opportunities. I think where we're all struggling is that we're just short on resources to be able to do that effective collaboration. And unfortunately, it seems government likes to use the word collaboration as a cost savings measure and not as an investment. And we're slowly trying to build on improving that that dynamic and really the investment in agriculture as a whole. So I think that's been the challenge is with our previous government, you know, they really came in as a cost savings government, right? We're going to balance the budget. What happened right before COVID was the very eager agriculture minister jumped in and made massive cuts to agriculture because he had political ambitions. The rest of the departments actually didn't get the cuts because we had this little COVID thing that popped in. And you know, price of oil has changed and the entire dynamic has changed. So I feel, generally speaking, on a province basis, and then on top of that, we have the province fighting with the federal government, right? So agriculture is actually a shared responsibility between the federal and provincial governments, but the provincial piece hasn't been functioning. I think the entire innovation system is broken. I think the investment levels are inappropriate. So it's really big picture challenges. So, and I think that's why the ASB advocacy piece to it all is a big important part of the puzzle. But, you know, we'd love to work with anybody on those challenges. You know, we're kind of a generalist-based organization, but we will leverage scientists like Dr. Charles Geddes on the kochia front. And, you know, there is probably opportunities even to do research on how to control kochia on roadways. Like, that's something we could probably partner with you on and things like that. So I think there's lots of ways that we could be more progressive, but it's going to have to start with bigger investments.
So
Yeah.
is it something, and I know that is a massive undertaking, like we understand the province and the feds, and we're very often caught in the middle too from a grant application, but there are some opportunities for us to maybe align strategically with some of those things. So I'll use climate change as an example, and it's just, you know, this is an example, so it's probably not, but even using climate change and saying, okay, well, we have to get ahead of this. We're having a harder time with weed management, which results in more difficulties with erosion and crop production as it relates to warmer, drier climates. So, you know, to meet some of those criteria for grants that have that factor, I think that there's some maybe some other approaches in how we do that, where it's, yes, it's ag, but it's ag under the lens of maybe what that grant framework is, because there is a case to be made there, and so that might be something too. I mean, we have a grants administrator. I don't know what's out there, but maybe that's something we could do some legwork on with Lethbridge County to see what may be present, because if we can secure some of the funding, that in turn could then funnel into some of these other opportunities and partnerships.
Well, even though you're using it as an example, you're bang on. We've accessed grants from new philanthropic sources that are climate change focused. So the Weston Foundation is one, RBC Tech for Nature Foundation. I myself I don't know how I got roped into this, but I'm now part of the Farmers for Climate Change Solutions board. And it's kind of a bit of a granola group, like more organic, so it's a bit of a risk for my own personal brand, but you know, they've been actually really good to work with, so I do think that you're exactly right on, and there's lots of ways that we can leverage, and I think if as long as we have the right ideas to be proactive and the right approach, there's probably opportunities. They're quite frustratingly challenging right now, and you know, our department on the research front created this ARDAR group, which is industry-led, right? And I don't think the ASBs are super stoked about how ARDAR has been working out either, because basically the crop commissions own it, right? And, you know, the milk guys are doing okay, which is fine, but it's usually, they moved it out to depoliticize the ag department, but now it's become a political beast on its own. So there is just so many dynamics at play right now, but that's been my strategy, is to look at those other opportunities and approaches, and you know, Farmer Smarter's more than tickled to work with the county and all the counties in southern Alberta, to be honest with you. So I think you're on the right path.
Super. Anything more on that topic?
I have a quick question. Who are you guys working with as your lead contacts on both the ASB and the Ag Environment Grant these days?
We work with Alan Afetha.
On both?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's, he's the main contact for us. If we have any questions, we go through him, and he goes up the ladder with it. But
Okay.
Doug McCauley's moved on.
Has he?
Yeah, I think Doug has moved on to another role up the ladder, and there's someone that's taking over as the lead for that
Okay.
department, so.
Thanks.
Super. Does administration need a motion to accept that report as information?
Yes.
Okay. Dan?
Motion to accept.
Okay. All in favor? That is carried.
Onward and upward, folks. We are now into item G, correspondence.
So there has been a lot of correspondence. We're not going to cover all these individually. They're mostly here for information. We will cover the Agriculture Service Board position statement. We'll cover that one. I've got it up on the board right now. Just comment on the resolutions. We were at the South Region Conference in Oyen last week. There were no resolutions from the South Region. So it seems to go in cycles. One year there's a lot of resolutions, and the next year there's virtually none. So we'll see what the rest of the province comes up with for that. So moving on to the Agriculture Service Board position statement. Just some comments I'll make before we get into this and open it up is that this position statement, we have a larger budget for extension than most other areas of the province. Some get a minimal grant of $15,000 to do a newsletter, and that doesn't even cover a newsletter now. So that position on the paper is not necessarily our view. It represents the entire province. So our grant, it covers $91,000, like I said, of the $163,000 program. The province is happy with all the work we do on environmental farm plans and promoting SCAP. That's the basis of the grant. As we go through that position statement, one statement they have in there is ag fieldmen are generalists. So that's what we are. We're not experts on anything. We come to know a lot about weeds and soil and that sort of thing, but we're relied on the provincial specialists, which are now gone. So that's in this position statement. That's where we could use help. Like they were always a phone call away. We had experts. The experts are not there anymore. So some of the questions the gap needs to be filled there. So with our extension, that leads into our strat planning. So next year the grant agreement will come up again, and what I'm suggesting for strategic planning is once we see how the government is directing us and what they want from both the resource management and our regular grant we do the majority of our work, then we do a strat planning. And let's face it, the legislative stream of funding, the activities that we do there, those are always going to be in there. That's what we're going to do. There's not a lot of leeway, but when you get into the extension, that's where things can change. We'll open that up hopefully when we do strat planning, and then we'll have a larger discussion on this. But there's no sense in having a big strat planning prior to understanding where the government is going to focus. Each grant, age 5 years now, they lead us in a different direction. So we don't want to do strat planning, think about going one way, and then they're leading us back somewhere else. So that grant should come out sometime next year. I would think later on in the year, and we could organize a meeting to do some strat planning. There is a provincial specialist that can come down and lead us with that, and they're involved directly with Ag Service Board. So, are there any questions on this extension position statement?
What was the intent of the position statement? And if you guys put it out, why wasn't there a resolution on it?
I don't understand, because it doesn't necessarily represent everyone, and we never really agreed that this is the position, right? Like nobody's voted on this or anything, so I guess it's something they looked at putting out. I don't know if it means a whole lot to Lethbridge County. I mean, we're going to do our own extension, and we're doing some of the things that Matthew does at Veer Off, and they're also going to be looking at putting in some of the things we're doing because what's working around the province. So this year, I don't know where the initiative come from, but it was a very short survey that went out, and we missed getting that to you. But it like I say, our position is quite a bit different than most of the province, I would think.
For the most part, I think I agree in principle with it. I think that there's been this massive hole and underinvestment in agricultural extension, but it requires a rebranding too, right? Because to be honest with you, farmers did not fight or care when the majority of those extension positions were cut from the province. They had become ineffective and unknown. Like if you don't leave the office, people aren't going to know who you are or what you're doing. So I don't think there's producer support to rebuild that extension model, especially within the government. I think there's probably some opportunities, and I mean, the message that extension needs to be invested in is strong. Nobody knows how to do it. I have heard that, on multiple occasions that, Ardar was, at first, it was implied that extension would be part of their mandate. Ardar has pushed back and said, no, you haven't given us enough money to properly do a good job on extension. So the department has been tasked with coming up with another collaborative extension model. So that's supposed to be starting underway, but I'm a little bit nervous about how well or effective this approach is going to be without honest to goodness investment. I mean, you guys have real dollars that you're investing in extension, and you know that it's not enough to do what you're doing, right? Farming Smarter, we invest probably about $600,000 a year on extension, and it's still just a drop in the bucket. So I think I'd like to see a bigger forum on this topic. And the last thing I want to see happen is the department hires another consultant to tell them what to do. Because I think that's been a failing approach. Let's hire MNP and all of a sudden they're extension specialists. I think we need to be the leaders, and I think the ASBs need to have a really strong voice in that. So I guess that's my 2 bits.
Yeah, so when we were in Oyen at the South Region meeting here last week, we were, some of the government folks were there, and they did say that they're going to be asking ASBs what they want. So that'll be coming out in the new year. And we've got to be careful here. One thing that this document explains is that the dollars for extension are not spread evenly throughout the province. It is a competitive process. So when we filled out that grant, that was a competition with everybody else on what share you were going to get. Because we're a very intensive livestock place, they like to focus on the environmental farm plans, and that's why I think we get a larger amount. The 91,000 we get, I'm told, is in the top 3. They won't tell you if you're number 1 or what else. But a lot of these municipalities are getting virtually nothing, or it provided so little to them they just give up on it and said we'll do what we can with our own money instead of putting out this extensive grant that gives you $15,000. So if folks want more money from other areas, that's going to be taking away from us in the next round. I mean, unless they come up with more funding. So there's a risk if...
So it gets political. I know a lot of the other area groups, sorry. Yeah.
Dan had a question there.
Well, just my question, like in how that one was kind of written, like it seems to touch popular topics, right? Emergency planning, mental health, some other stuff. Like, is this really where extension needs to be going first of all, right? And versus addressing the issues of farming, right? I realize some of those other parts maybe need to be discussed, but is that the role of an extensionist first of all, right?
Or an ag service board. Yeah, I mean, it's clearly defined what ag service boards do. Extension, it gets a little muddy, right? So.
The only point I was gonna add to why those are probably in there is because a lot of those other groups, they don't even run their own extension program. They sublet it out to a different group.
Yeah, so it's, extension will take a greater focus when we do the grant again. And upcoming on the meeting, we've got a couple talking points that Bill McMillan was going to lead, but he's unable to make it today. So they're also extension led and possibly move into a grant. And Jeremy's going to cover those.
So, Gary, in terms of this particular position statement, are you looking for some direction from the board on, and what direction are you looking for?
Not right now. I think when we do the strat planning, that's when we'll get our position on that, and then it'll be led by what the province wants. So we have to gear up for getting a large grant again so we can carry on with topics that help Lethbridge County.
Okay, perfect. All right. Does anybody have any other questions on any of the other correspondence? All right. And that, I guess we will move on now. To other business, H1, liquid manure dragline update. Bill McMillan, substituted by Jeremy Wixon.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to read the briefing that Bill asked him to just provide something to me this morning because he couldn't make it to this meeting today just because of his illness, and I told him to stay away from us to not contaminate. So what he has been doing is Lethbridge County, Alberta Milk, Alberta Pork, through the Intensive Livestock Working Group, are developing a pilot project to demonstrate the advantages of using dragline-based liquid manure application systems to move liquid manure from storage facilities through to land application. This system involves using temporary or semi-permanent pipelines to transport liquid manure from the storage facility or lagoon to the field intended for manure application. The intent of the pilot, as we discussed kind of in our summer planning session, encourage the use of these umbilical-based liquid manure applications, decrease the odor nuisance issues, reduce heavy load impacts on roads and bridges, improve safety by reducing the use of slow-moving vehicles on public roads, identify and address potential roadblocks to broader implementation of the preferred practice, develop a culture of collaboration and understanding amongst rural stakeholders. So the pilot project will target the Picture Butte Nobleford area due to the high concentration of dairy and hog operations that utilize this system. To promote this pilot project and identify producers interested in the pilot project, Lethbridge County, along with Alberta Milk and Alberta Pork, is hosting an information and feedback session at the Picture Butte Community Center on November 1st from 2:30 to 5:30 p.m. So we will advertise that on our social media, and we'll get that information out to people. So that is right around the corner next week.
Yeah, the letter's been sent out to dairy farm producers for the attendance there. And this is a good thing to be looking at. It just takes the impact off the roads. Our folks that are running these lines down the top of the road. Yes, 2 days ago, there were folks running dragline on top of the road in a snake-like fashion. So, then they're sending out enforcement to stop that. So we're trying to make a way for it's easy for everybody and lessen the impact on the roads.
It's intended to be a collaboration product with producers. Now, this is the starting point, as we talked about creating areas where they basically can have dedicated road crossings for their facilities so that they could actually get their manure applications out to field without it doing damage to the roadway and just providing ease of application. These umbilical systems, I completely support them. They are very much the way I would hope to see it done completely in the future versus trucking this material out, because it's just efficiency-wise too. I mean, I think farmers are definitely, or applicators are definitely finding it very, very useful.
And to be clear, it's happening already, but they're running them through our culverts. Culverts are made for drainage to go through low spots. Some of these ideas to run them through the roads may go on a hill, wherever it's practical. And then at least we know they're there, so then it's not going to create drainage issues down the road either, and it's not a free-for-all.
Right. This is a continuation of the presentation that we had, or I believe in the spring, about this. So this is, we're now in moving forward with the implementation of the test pilot on that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. In June, we talked about this.
All right, any more questions on that? On to H2, research possibilities with the University of Lethbridge.
This is me again. So one thing we were approached by the University of Lethbridge for some potential research initiatives. Now, lots of these are interesting projects that could have different regional collaborators, different regional stakeholders. So the three that I asked both the university and Bill to convene on how we could leverage funding essentially the best we possibly could. So there is a couple funding sources out there. The one in particular that we've zoned in on is MyTax, which basically is a 50-50 funding research or a research grant up to $60,000, which would basically allow a PhD level student or master's student to basically work on a designated research project within the area. There are also some other ones like NSERC, which I'm sure community member Coles is very familiar with, as he's probably applying for it as well right now. And the university is looking at those types of grant applications as well. So the three in particular, after we narrowed down some of these options, were the first one was to do with irrigation and stormwater management, and I've approached the LNID and the SMRID to be sponsors and collaborators with us on this. The funding, like I said, for those ones, we're looking to for Lethbridge County to contribute $10,000, and then for each of the irrigation to contribute $10,000 to this addressing irrigation and stormwater infrastructure going into the future. That is one potential research project. The second one that was brought forward was in regards to nutrient management, and the nutrient management portion was targeted with Lethbridge County and Alberta pork and milk and the beef producers. Same thing, this is like a continuation of our extension, but this is very much research-based PhD level students working on these type of activities. The third one that we were looking at as well was one to do with greenhouses and greenhouse efficiency. We had a presentation last year from a PhD student who had done one of the stacking greenhouse efficiency research projects, and this was a further extension of that. And I haven't currently approached them, but I'll be approaching companies like Rainbow and DeVry essentially on the same thing, getting some private investment into doing research projects in that regard. So the intention is basically to leverage grant funding for these projects, and some of these are multi-year, very much multi-year things. The irrigation and stormwater one is something that we're facing on an ongoing basis. Climate change can throw us a wallop. I know when I previously worked for the MD of Tabor, when we had extensive flooding for 40 plus days, there was definitely a lot of anxiety in the area about irrigation. I mean, with the fields already being saturated and with uncommon snowfall, the spring melt was very catastrophic to infrastructure and to agriculture at that time. So we're trying to hit a combination of different pieces along with this. But like I said, part of this is trying to leverage grant funding with the university as part of that.
So, question for you on that. And I think I heard you say this, but I just want to make sure that I'm on the right track on that. This is, a lot of these grants require input from, it's a shared resource situation where if we get dollars, there's matching for the grants?
Yeah, like I said, the MyTax one is a 50-50, and basically it would fund a research candidate for potentially 4 years.
Okay, and so is this for information for the board, or is there an ask of?
This is a discussion to be had with the ASB committee as far as, when we talk about, just like we talked about similarly, how are we being involved with propagating development in this area, and that's the same kind of thing with this.
So are you looking for us for direction on which one of these three we would prefer, or are we heading in all three directions?
I'm looking for feedback and input as far as if there's, as as Ken touched on, I mean, are we doing enough essentially in advocating for different things? Is this part of that advocation piece? Where else do we need to be advocating essentially for funding dollars? It's a open topic discussion essentially.
Well, and I would open it up to the board. Any comments, thoughts?
I think we'll carry these forward as well in the strat plan for next year when we're gathering more ideas on this next year.
Oh, sorry.
The irrigation one is interesting, seeing as how the SMRID is expanding their water with Chin and with the lack of water we had this year, and if there's not enough snowpack this winter, possibly continuing into next year, it's interesting to see how, it would be interesting to see some research done on the reservoirs and how they do contain water and how it's being used, and down the line into, like, say, with extending or giving out, or not giving out, but already extending water rights to producers and stuff, which most of them will probably be into potatoes, beets, or beans, how that's going to affect watering down the line.
Well, I mean, part of research is also not being 10 years too late. Because it is about, I mean, for myself, when I think of research, I'm like, lots of times we're doing research after the fact, and I'm like, it's great to have some historical data, but sometimes you need to find a starting point to go, okay, we're going to start looking at it now, because the net effects, it's great to look back on X amount of years and say, well, we should have done this. And I'm like, well, why don't we start and get there versus putting the horses out there first?
Yes, maybe just for clarity, and Jeremy, tell me if I have this wrong, but I think the intent of this discussion was to see if ASB supports these initiatives. If they do, then there is kind of a joint request to council and budget for financial support specifically to these three, as well as maybe some advocacy to LNID and SMRID around making financial contributions and other third-party partnerships as a joint initiative. So I think, if I'm just clarifying, and again, tell me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, it really is, does ASB see value in each of these initiatives? Do they support them? And is this something that we want to bring forward for financial considerations and contributions and to be advocating for with these third-party partners in conjunction with the university? Did I get that right, Jeremy?
Correct.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. That's kind of where I was trying to go with it, but you summarized that much better. So, as a board, do we see value in these three initiatives?
I can't say I've got enough information on the initiatives to say one way or the other. I think it's tough to get into the research game in general, but if, it has to align with the priorities of the county. I think if there's value, it should be aligned with, the priorities that you guys are working on as well. University's tough sometimes to work with if they don't have the right person to lead that project. You may be chasing rainbows in a sense. I know my experiences with the MyTax and NSERC has been, it's awkward, it's challenging, it's slow. Yeah.
I could probably speak a little bit further to that, is in particular for the research candidates that we have been in discussions with. The one in particular for the irrigation and stormwater maintenance just published a report, and I will send that report out to the ASB group to give you a bit more information on that. She just did one on drought throughout southern Alberta, and very much looking at all the basins and whatnot. And she's specialized, she's an irrigation engineer, and she's got lots of background in that regard. So, I mean, very much, I mean, when we had these initial discussions, I'm like, well, better be people who are involved or have had some background in this, not just random placements of research candidates. This is a continuation of essentially previous research. These individuals have done. And same thing with the greenhouses, it's somebody who has actually done some efficiency work already, and then we're looking at where they can push that. On the nutrient management one, that one was a to be determined as well, but that was a discussion that was happening between both the university and the college on that regard.
Okay, Dan, any thoughts?
Well, I think on a higher level, I think these are relevant to our county, right? Like these are like irrigation, obviously. As long as we're going down the right pathway of that, like you mentioned, retention of water, expansion and so forth, but I think more work has to be done with the producers of actually understanding what water they're using. So I think there's aspects of research in there, working with farmers and stuff to understand that better. I think from a level, I agree. But on the same token, it's like, are we going to get that?
Logan? Any more thoughts?
No, I agree. I think the three topics are worth looking into anyways, just pushing them forward. But like I also agree with Ken, though, there should be maybe a little more background into them, like a little more information on each one of them, and then. But there's only the four of us here today too, so
Yeah.
so it's kind of hard to speak for all of us when there's just the four of us here too. So
Go ahead, Cole.
Jeremy, could we request, because I know that any third parties are gonna ask for the same thing, and we talked about it, could we request a presentation on each of these, even if it's a high level, so we get some more specifics, research intent and objectives, kind of the premise or the foundation for why they chose this and what they hope to accomplish? And then, I don't know if we schedule that at an ASB meeting, or, I mean, I think it'd be helpful even for council in general to understand what the financial commitment is, to Ken's point, and where we're going with it, because in theory, I very much, when we've talked about it, feel the same. It sounds great, but don't know enough about it to speak to the specifics.
Right. I have sort of a similar concern with that, in the sense of, looking at the three options, and if we're in a situation where we're going to choose all three, then are we watering this down too much, where we're just not concentrating the resources where they need to be concentrated? Just from the standpoint of, if we're going to go down this road, I would like to maybe concentrate it on one effort that is important and actually do something that has some merit and value to that one effort, as opposed to, taking the small amount of resources we have and dividing it up into three different avenues and doing a poor job on all three. All right, anything further on that? Moving on. H3, ASB strategic planning possibilities. I think we've sort of covered this and hit the outskirts of this on most of the meeting.
Yeah, so there's a lot involved with extension and where we're going. And like I said, the best time for that strategic planning will be next year when the grant information comes out. So I think we'd be patient and wait till that comes out. And then more work needs to be done on the last two topics we talked about to, provide information and whether that fits in, on how we fit it in and how we fund our portion. Is it a council initiative or is it an ASB initiative? A stormwater council, or is that an ag service board? So there's a lot of, I don't know how far along we are in those discussions yet. And Bill would have had a little more information on them if he was here. So.
Superb. We're suffering from a distinct lack of personnel today.
I just had one question for you on that, Gary, because, and I understand the approach is wait to see what the funding framework is and then build your plan accordingly. Does that mean there is no opportunity to influence how they put forward that next plan? Or is it just that's the way it's always been?
No, they're going to be asking what we want early on. So we'll see. I don't think they'll want any information until our next meeting, so we'll be able to provide. And maybe they'll have an idea and give us a questionnaire that we can take to our Ag Service Board meeting and see what the focus should be. Like I say, we're a little bit unique. We're intense here, and our extension needs are more.
there is the overriding question too of whether or not, I mean, as much as we had a meeting in the summer to talk about, you know, the future looking for the ASB committee, sometime in the new year, probably following the ASB conference, but having a session with the ASB committee as a whole and basically talking about what's our approach going to be for advocacy and how are we going to approach this from a strategic standpoint moving forward.
Superb.
So probably something in the realm of February or March.
Wonderful.
And our next meeting, I think, is scheduled for March, so maybe we can coincide with that.
Okay, sounds like good timing. All right. H4, Shaughnessy Playground video.
I suggest we move this one right to the end of the meeting and we go into the closed session regarding the Bank of Montreal Farm Family Award.
Okay, I have no objection to that. And we get a motion to move into closed session.
I motion to move into the closed section.
All in favor? That is carried. Candace, let us know when you're ready.
And just before I close out, moving forward, meetings for the future, of course, we'll all be at that provincial conference, hopefully in January, if for those that can attend. Past that, maybe we arrange a meeting prior to our next formal meeting, a workshop type thing. We'll see if it's needed. And beyond that, we can cover it at our next meeting. But in the summer, we were thinking of having not a workshop so much as, but a field day where we rent a bus and the members of the Ag Service Board can see what we actually do. Hopefully it's a day we can spray, mow, and you'll understand, what our employees go through on a daily basis. There is the grant application shows the work we do. It's the employees that carry it out. And without them, nothing gets done. I mean, that's paper, but the summer season is very, very intense. So not a lot of days off for anybody. So that's kind of the plan, but we can deal that at the next meeting. So last up, we'd like to show you a video that Maddie, our communications coordinator, put together. Matt did the video. It's just what the project in Shaughnessy at the playground looks like now. So if you can get that up, Matt. Yeah, start her over. So that's the project we put together with the help of the Shaughnessy Community Association, and they developed their own board led by Kim Christensen, and they did the organization of, they're involved in the entire planning process from what goes in to what needed to be done. It's so they take ownership of their project, and they certainly have done that. The community involvement was awesome. On the build day, we didn't think we'd have enough people. We set aside 4 or 5 of our staff to go over there and help. They didn't need them. There was a local feedlot that sent a lot of their employees, and then just community members. It was the best in community involvement I've seen, and they like what they got. And that skating rink there, the court area will be flooded, half of it for hockey, and they make some good ice out there. And since that's been built, it's been used. There's a lot of use out there. It's great from going from nobody being there, like Matt can attest. Like when you go do a playground inspection and there's people out there, you got to move them out of the way so you can do your work. Or mowing. It's really, really great to see, and all the credit goes to that group, that organization that helped make it, Shaughnessy. So, also the largest project that we've done as a county in one of these communities for a playground. So,
I had the opportunity to take a tour of it here a couple of weeks ago when our council did the road tour, and it's an amazing facility. It looks awesome, and And just hearing from the residents, it's just a wonderful, wonderful addition to the community, and they're very appreciative of it. And I think it's a great success story, and it's one of those very visual things that we can look at and be proud of.
Yeah, and I know the residents out there are very proud of what they have created. This is their park. It's, you know, I didn't tell them what to put in there. I mean, I don't live there. It was them that did everything, and it is their park, that's for sure, so.
It's pretty cool. They got a couple little seat-operated excavator toys where where the kid can sit down and operate levers and, huh? Oh, of course I did. I didn't sit on it because I'm a little bit on the girthy side for that, but yeah, absolutely. You just sat down and run the bucket. It's a neat facility. Yeah. And that brings us to the end of our meeting. Yeah. I will entertain a motion to adjourn from anybody that feeling desirable of doing so. Well, we could sit here all day, Dan. We are adjourned. Thank you. I appreciate your efforts, everyone.